Yeah.
And I was never suicidal, but for the first time in my life after my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, um, my everything, was happening so fast. My kids had just, gotten in their accident. My son had a brain tumor. And now my husband, who was my rock through all of that, like we got through that together, was now facing a terminal illness. And I had a complete mental breakdown. And for the first just 24/7 panic attacks. I could not get my heart rate to slow down, my breathing to slow down. I couldn't stop crying. Saw no light. Couldn't get out of bed. I was trying everything. And for the first time in my life, I thought, I understand why people become suicidal because I've never felt so hopeless. But there was hope. I just couldn't see it. I just was so sucked into that darkness. So if you're feeling that way, I get it. I do. But I promise you, it's not hopeless. There is still light there. And there are people that are available to help.
Yeah, hopefully I'm doing all this correctly.
I'm sure you are.
We'll see. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Doing all right. I get some of my notes up here. Waited a long time. Finally,
I'm a busy woman.
finally get to meet you, KELCI Jagger, grief educator. I'm curious about that. I love the title, certified life coach, founder of Rise with Grief. Kind of curious about all of that and your background that led you to this, and kind of what intrigued me and got me to contact you with some of the stuff I've gone through. So yeah, what led you to all this stuff?
Um, well, I definitely did not seek out to be a grief coach. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Um, but when my life kind of fell apart with my kids getting into an accident, and then as a result of that accident, discovering that our oldest son had a brain tumor, and all of that happening all at once in the middle of COVID really was super traumatic. And I experienced a lot of grief. I didn't recognize it as grief at the time. I just thought it was trauma. And then 4 months after that happened, my husband was diagnosed with aggressive leukemia. And so my world just went from being sunny and happy and smooth to completely just falling apart. And when my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, I experienced a lot of grief because of the life that we no longer had. Our life was now ruled by cancer. And it was at that time that I realized that I was experiencing grief. And so I dove into trying to help myself in surviving this most horrible, horrible experience. And then my husband, I was his caregiver, and he fought so hard for 559 days. And then he passed away in July of 2022. And I thought, I thought, how am I going to do this? Like we have four sons. My partner, my best friend, my everything is now gone. And I just didn't see any way that I was possibly going to be able to make it through. But I knew that I had to. I knew for my kids that I had to because my kids had already lost a parent and I was now their only parent and they were looking to me to lead them through this. So as I as I dug in and did everything I possibly could to climb out of this dark, dark hole, I discovered different tools. I discovered different things that were helping me. And but I still wasn't like I still was not happy. Like I was surviving, I was going to therapy, I was doing all the things. We had an aerospace business at the time. I was running our business. I was doing all the things that on the outside looked like, oh, she's really got it together. But on the inside, I was felt so broken and I was not happy. And we had such a my husband Colin and I had built such a rich, full, beautiful life. Not that we didn't have struggles, because we definitely did. Um, but I knew what was possible. And I wasn't okay with settling. I wasn't okay with like, this is my life now for the next 50, 60 years. And so I enrolled in a life coaching school to help myself, not to be a life coach, but just to help myself. I am an RN as well, so I have always had this kind of healing tendency. Like I've always gravitated towards healing people around me. It's just who I am instinctually. And so when I enrolled in the life coaching school and I started gaining more tools under my belt and kind of combining that with all the grief knowledge and experience that I had gained over the last couple of years, and I combined them to it was like this light bulb went on. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I finally, it was the first time that I didn't feel so lost, that I didn't look to the future and feel so overwhelmed and just sad, like I was settling, and that there was no way that I could ever get that rich, full life back. And that was the first time where I saw it as a possibility. And I just knew as I integrated those tools and everything into my life, I saw my grief transform and I just knew I couldn't not share it with the world. I couldn't not help other people that were also struggling. And so
Mhm.
that's how Rise with Grief was born, my grief and loss coaching business. And that is, in a nutshell, Jim, in a nutshell, how I got started. And I absolutely love it. Like, it's so weird to say that I love talking to people about their grief all day long, but the work is so fulfilling to see the transformation that I recognize that I saw in myself. To see it happening with my
Mhm.
clients is just, it's so rewarding. And selfishly, it's very healing for my grief as well.
Yeah, not selfish though. I don't see that really. I have a something I printed off up on my wall, and it's like my only goal is to experience adventure and spread joy. So it's like you're doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that motto. I
Yeah.
do. I try, like, I always say you have to look for the light because when your life is consumed by darkness, it's very easy to just get sucked into that black hole and just be consumed by everything that's going wrong. But there is always light. And sometimes, some days, some moments, it's a lot harder to find. But if you look for it, it's always there. And the more you look for it, the more you the more you recognize it, the easier it is to find. But it's not ignoring the the darkness. It's just acknowledging the light and focusing on that as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, focus on where you're going. I can You could break that down into like my off-roading, my dirt biking,
Mhm.
and when I'm out riding with rookies and I see them take a corner and they go wide and they go off into the woods where they didn't want to go, or snowboarding, same thing. You
Yes.
look where you want to go.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you focus on is what is going to drive you. It's the path you're going to take. And so
Hmm.
we have to be mindful. And it's not, a lot of people get confused thinking that it's toxic positivity or like, oh, I just have to be grateful for this struggle. I have to find the silver lining. And it's not that actually at all. It's just recognizing that there's still good, even amidst the turmoil. There is still good. There is still light that's available.
Hmm. So my contacting you and telling you this kind of part of my story, but come from a big family. I'm the youngest one. I'm the baby. Um, Now my whole family is down to just me and my brother, and it's a whole series of, some expected, mom and dad. That happens, at this age. That's not unexpected. Um,
Mhm.
but I kind of stepped up as the baby of the family. Um, 19 years old, oldest sister commits suicide, and I just kind of took charge and dealt with the cops and all that stuff and stepped in for mom, and dad kind of checked out, and then I just excuse me, became my role at a young age, and went on to, well, mom had 4 kids and 2 grandkids die before she died.
Mm,
So
that's
yeah,
so awful.
yeah. And I was just the one that handled each one. And yeah, I was thinking about it this morning that the whole stages of grief thing, and I just don't see it that way because I think we're all kind of built differently. I think it's a more of a personal path. I look at the way my mom handles stuff, and her last child that died was within like 6 months of her passing. She always had this great outlook on life. And then I've just been observing this. I don't know how accurate it is, but um, and my brother, it's like he breaks down really hard, and then he's just like done. I'm envious almost of that. How he just packs it together, grieves super hard, and then he just goes out and tackles life.
Yep.
So, what's your take on that?
So there's a lot of things in that little segment that you said that I want to unpack. First,
Hmm.
you talked about the stages of grief, and you said, I just don't see it that way. Everybody grieves differently, and that is 100% accurate. The stages of grief are outdated, and that came about from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross over 50 years ago, in her book on death and dying. And she later came out and said she wished she didn't label it the stages of grief, because the way society kind of took that and ran with it. And the way that came about was she was studying people who were dying, and she noticed that they all experienced these 5 stages. Excuse me. And so she labeled it the 5 stages of grief. She was never meant it to be packaged in a way that everybody that grieves is going to experience each of these stages, and it's going to be linear, and you're going to move from one stage to the next. That is not how grief is. You may experience all of those things, you may not. Grief is not linear. It's super messy. You go up, down, sideways, twist and turn. And there's a lot of time people think, well, I'm regressing in my grief. Like, I was doing so well. And then all of a sudden I just, had a really hard day or a really hard week, and I feel like I'm slipping, I'm regressing. And there's no such thing as regressing in grief. There's, just like you said, it's just everybody grieves differently, and it's not packaged in this organized way. Grief comes in waves, and sometimes the ocean is calm and we're floating along, and sometimes it's a full-on hurricane and you're grasping for air. And just like you said, your brother, he will experience it and grieve really hard, and then he picks himself up and he moves on. And a lot of times people think that our tendency and our instinct is to run away from the grief because it's painful. So we instinctually run away from pain, but we can't outrun grief. We can't outrun our feelings, our emotions. So the only way through grief is to actually run right towards it, to go right into the grief, to allow yourself to feel everything. And that, there's no shortcuts in grief, but if there was a shortcut, that's the shortcut.
Yeah.
And that's why you recognize in your brother, you're like, oh, wait, he feels everything, and then he can get up and move on. And that's what happens, because what we resist, what we push away, will not go away. Think of your emotions like a toddler. If a toddler wants something or a young child wants something, they're going to keep bugging you until you pay attention to them. Like, they don't just stop.
Sure.
And our emotions are the same way, and they get louder and louder and louder. But so if when we stop and look at the child and like get in their, on their eye level and pay attention to them and say, what is it that you need? Like, what do you need from me right now? Then they calm down and they're not like screaming and yelling and, pulling on your shirt or whatever they're doing. And our emotions are the same exact way. They're like a screaming toddler, a screaming young child, and they just need our attention. And once we pay attention to them, they settle down. And it doesn't mean they're not going to have another fit or another tantrum, because they will. And then you do the same thing again. And that's how
So
you get through.
that makes sense. Hindsight, maybe that's why I do what I do, and started that at 19 years old, is dive in and take charge and deal with law enforcement and paramedics and funeral homes, and getting stuff packed up and cleaning out somebody's house and that kind of a thing. Just dive in and kind of get to it. That whole just packing up people's stuff that's an emotional journey right there.
For sure, for sure. And there's no like, unless you have to move or unless there's some, you know, reason why you need to go through their things. Obviously, there are reasons why you do need to do that right away. But if there is no reason, there's no rush in that. Like I'll have clients that
Mhm,
will say, "Well, it's been a year and so I'm going through the closet and I'm packaging up everything, but it's so hard and I don't want to be doing it." And I say, "Well, then why are you doing it?" And they say, "Well, because it's been a year and so I need to do it." And I'm like,
mhm,
"There's no like you got to look at your reasons why." Like if you really want to, that's fine. But if you're doing it just because it's been 6 months or it's been a year or Sally down the street lost, you know, her husband and she did it already and I haven't, that's not a good enough reason why. You have to look
right.
at your reasons why. There's no ever and like you said, everybody grieves differently.
Hmm.
Grief is a universal experience, meaning that if you are human, you will experience grief in some form or another. And, you know, grief isn't just from losing a loved one, it's any type of loss. And so you will experience grief if you're human, but it's unique, as in everybody processes it, everybody deals with it differently. There's no one size fits all way to navigate through grief.
Hmm. I, I've had people think that I just must be emotionally damaged. With the first sister, that was a suicide, shot herself, came to, what do we do about the mess? And I said, I'll take it. And everybody's like, there's people that do that. We can hire somebody. I said, no, I want to do it. And, big sister sized pool of blood. And it was,
Mm,
it
it's
was,
so
it was rough,
awful.
but, it sounds weird maybe to say it's somehow therapeutic, but to just get really close to it worked for me. Yeah. So I see why you wouldn't want to, not ever go in that house again or whatever. And
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody's different. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. You know, you doing that, saying that it was therapeutic in a way, another person could be like, oh no, that would be so triggering for me. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. It's
Right.
just figuring out what what you need, what you personally need.
That out of the four siblings, three of them were suicide. Um, and the last one, oldest brother, um, I get contacted by law enforcement, and they're like, we can go contact her. And I said, no, I'll be there tomorrow morning, and I don't want anyone else to tell her. And and I had several offers, I'll come be there with you, I'll help. And I said, no, I'll do it. I'm the guy for this. And I said, you watch with my mom's attitude, she's gonna obviously break down, but it'll be within a few minutes that she's gonna be concerned about me. That And sure enough, it was, just a couple minutes after I told her, she's like, poor you. You have to tell the mom. Um, that's that's my role, I guess.
Yeah, that's really traumatic. Have you worked through that trauma? Do you think?
Whatever natural way I do, it's not like I went and talked to anybody about it or anything. It's to me, that's I could be wrong about this. I don't know. Maybe I'm a time bomb. Maybe it's all going to backfire on me, but that just getting immersed in it and dealing with it and taking care of it seems to be how I work through it, and then mom and I inevitably just have a good long talk about that. And I've always said it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's a lot. That's really heavy.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, as far as work through it, nothing like officially actually working on it.
So you don't have to like work with a therapist or, do EMDR. You don't have
Yeah.
to do those things to work through your trauma, to process your grief. Um, do you feel like so trauma is the Latin word for trauma is wound. So trauma is an experience that's happened in the past that is affecting our present.
Hmm.
So do you feel like, I mean, of course, and I'm not talking about like feeling sad and having emotions, but I'm talking about like panic, anxiety. Do you feel like you have things from your past, trauma from your past affecting you now?
Yeah, I certainly do. I have a couple of key ones. Might not mention what they are, but they're none of those deaths, which is, three siblings, a niece and a nephew. Nephew was a suicide as well. Um, so I can relate to that. It's like, yes, things that just aren't dealt with that nag you. Those 3 o'clock in the morning, eyes
Mm-hmm.
open, staring at the ceiling. Yeah, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's never those. It's like no regrets
Mm-hmm.
dealing with any of that. Yeah, but I know it's a different. Mine's a totally different path. Some people just about freak out on that. It's how I deal with stuff, but and I don't recommend it. Like like you've said, everybody's got their path. I don't recommend doing pretty much anything I do. No. So, or the way I do stuff. Um, so those are not any of those nagging things that create anxiety or regrets. None of those. Yeah.
Okay, good, good.
There's
Um,
sadness that comes every once in a
yes,
while, which
yes. And
however that comes up.
the sadness is expected. Obviously, there's clean pain and there's dirty pain. And the clean pain is the pain that you would expect. Like, of course, there's sadness that comes up. Of course, you miss them, all the things that you would expect. That's clean pain. The dirty pain is the stuff we layer on top of the clean pain. It's the regrets, as you say. It's the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. It's the guilt of I am not doing this and I should be doing this, or I should be further along, or it's all the shame blame cycles that we do. And that dirty pain is what causes us so much suffering and grief. And grief is painful. Like there's no way to stop that pain. It hurts because we love who we've lost, and that absence is so painful. The suffering is what we unknowingly add on top of that pain, and that's what we can work on. And that's what I work with my clients on, is decreasing that suffering and eventually eliminating that suffering. and finding a way forward where you can find the light and you can focus on that light instead of the darkness.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like I have a almost natural ability to do that. Um, and kind of forgiving myself. That happened a long time ago, first sister, I tried to help her out. Little clinical depression on that side of the family. She had an eating disorder, and I tried, and I know mom carried some of that with her. Uh, but like you say, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Um, I had no problem going back and just forgiving a 19-year-old kid. Yeah, it's like I didn't have the skills, you know.
No,
Yeah,
no. Yeah, there's a lot. Guilt is so common in grief. And a lot of times it's that, "Oh, if I had recognized, or if I'd only done this, or, if I'd only got them to the doctor sooner," or we hold on to this idea that we had some sort of control over the situation. And our minds would rather feel guilty than powerless. And the reality is that we really had no control over the situation. Like we just can't control things like death. And that's a really hard thing for our mind to accept because we would rather feel guilty than feel powerless because then there's a possibility that it can happen again.
yeah. Well, yeah, suicide comes with a different angle to that, you know, versus terminal illness, that kind of a thing. That's easier
It does.
to
I know
cope
where you're
with.
going. I know where you're going with
Yeah,
this. And it actually, I mean, it does in that, there's ways to get help and, treat that. But
if I only said back to shoulda, coulda, woulda. If I'd only said
but
this,
it's still the that's your mind creating stories of
yeah,
illusions that you have control. You could have done every single thing right, every possible thing,
yeah,
noticed every, sign, and they could have, went and got help and taken medication and did all these things, and it
hmm,
still could have led to their suicide.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
And
kind
our
of where I
mind
was
doesn't
going with
want to
that.
accept that.
Is a message for anybody that's dealing with that, because I've put that in its place. I feel like I have. It's like you know, there's no way around that, and I could see that where all four of them, there's no way I had the tools to keep them out of there. I tried. You got to try, but it's where I was going with that is more of a message to anybody that's dealing with that don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, there is help available. Um, there's the crisis. Oh my gosh, I just blanked on what is it? It's like the 911, but it's the suicide hotline.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is it 611? I just 311. I just totally blanked on, but there's a number, a crisis suicide hotline, which is like 911. If you're having thoughts of harming yourself, you can dial that number any time of day,
Mhm.
any day of the year. And there are trained professionals that will help you not feel so alone, help you find the resources that you need. There is help available. It's not, all is not lost.
Yeah.
And I was never suicidal, but for the first time in my life after my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, um, my everything, was happening so fast. My kids had just, gotten in their accident. My son had a brain tumor. And now my husband, who was my rock through all of that, like we got through that together, was now facing a terminal illness. And I had a complete mental breakdown. And for the first just 24/7 panic attacks. I could not get my heart rate to slow down, my breathing to slow down. I couldn't stop crying. I saw no light. Couldn't get out of bed. I was trying everything. And for the first time in my life, I thought, I understand why people become suicidal because I've never felt so hopeless. But there was hope. I just couldn't see it. I just was so sucked into that darkness. So if you're feeling that way, I get it. I do. But I promise you, it's not hopeless. There is still light there. And there are people that are available to help.
Yep. Good message. I've reached out to somebody at one point, years and years ago, but and it was simply him picking up the phone and real early in the morning. So, and just saying, go home and go to bed. I'll talk to you in the morning. It's like, yes, he gave me an alternative plan. So sometimes it's that
Mm-hmm.
easy, with,
Yeah.
yeah, there it is, little glimmer of light. Okay, now I have an alternative plan.
Yes. We
Yeah.
have to find those little glimmers of light and
Mm,
hold on to those. And just the smallest bit of light can snuff out so much darkness. It has so much power. If you think of standing in a room that has no windows and no, it's completely pitch dark. And if you light one little tiny flame on a candle, it exudes so much light and it snuffs out so much darkness. And so, just what I tell people that are my clients that are bereaved, and they also have a lot of feel hopeless. Like, how am I ever going to be able to get through this? I'm never going to be happy again. I'm never going to, if they've lost a spouse, I'm never going to be able to be loved by someone that way again. And it's becomes very hopeless. And I tell them they need to shorten their lens, like they need to zoom in. Because when we look too far down the line, if we look too far at even just our day, sometimes it just becomes so overwhelming. And when we're overwhelmed, we just spin. We don't actually get anything done. We're just spinning. It's like running on, one of those hamster wheels. But
yeah.
if we zoom in and just look at this moment, in this moment, what's the light I can find? In this moment, what do I need? What's one tiny little baby step that I can do right now?
Yeah.
And then you hold on to that, you do that, and then you take the next step. And when you do that, you start gaining confidence in your ability, you start gaining some momentum and motivation, and then you can slowly start expanding your lens. But when things seem so overwhelming, it's really important that you just zoom in
Yeah.
and get
Yeah. And that
laser
one
focused.
step creates direction. I've heard, I think I heard it from Jordan Peterson, listening to him, that if people are lost in the desert, they don't have anxiety because they don't know which way to go. They have anxiety because there's too many ways to go. And then, like you say, then you're caught in that
Yes.
whirlwind. Yeah.
Yes.
So little
Mhm.
direction, one step, boom. I get that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. One tiny little step at a time.
Yeah. And that even that breaking down your successes in that small of increments just compounds. Now you're going in a direction. Yeah. Cool.
And
Love
you
that
don't
stuff.
even need to know, sometimes people will say, but I have no idea what direction. Like, how do I know that it's the right step? How do I know? And you don't have to know. You just take a guess and take that step. And even if that's not in the right direction, at least you take that information as feedback and you're like, oh, this step was not in the right direction. So I'm going to pivot and go this way instead. It's all feedback, it's all forward motion.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, people don't regret making the wrong decision. They regret not trying.
Yeah. And I mean,
So you,
listen, I've had my fair share of failures, quote unquote failures. It's not fun. It's not
mhm.
fun and it's not easy and it's painful, but it's still forward motion. It's getting you to where you ultimately want to be.
Think about where we go from there. Hmm. Yeah, I think your job is fascinating. It's got to be pretty rewarding helping
Yes.
people navigate this stuff.
Like I said in the beginning, it's super rewarding when I see those shifts and those light bulbs go off.
Hmm.
And I meet with my clients every week. So I can see the progression so clearly from our very first meeting to, sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes just after our first session, I can see a change. And then I'll get an email like, oh my gosh, KELCI, I used this tool that you gave me. And like for the first time, I didn't spiral out of control or, just so many things. And it's for me a way to turn my pain into purpose.
Hmm.
And it's what helps me to get up each day. It's what helps me to keep moving forward.
Curious about those tools. Have you ever heard the acronym HALT? So if
Mm-mm.
you're prone to depression, halt. It's don't let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So it's a cool little checklist.
I love
It
that.
Yeah, and if you do it, you get yourself into one of those situations and you don't know what it is. Just check that checklist, and one will pop out at you. And sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's just as simple as call a friend. Don't even talk about that. Just whatever friendly voice on the other line, and all of a sudden that was it. You might
Yes.
check that and find out. Well, I'm tired too. I also need a nap.
Hmm.
But so that
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, it's a cool
I
one.
love that.
Yeah, it's
Because we have basic human needs. And if those basic human needs are not given the attention that they need, then our window of tolerance, our bandwidth gets very, very, very small. And
mm-hmm,
what we can tolerate becomes very, very small. But those things, when those basic needs are met, like hunger, like, feeding ourselves, What was
Hmm.
the H? Was it
Hungry,
what was the
angry,
A?
lonely, or
Angry.
tired.
Angry. Okay, yeah. So anger is usually rooted in two different emotions. It's usually rooted in being of fear, being scared of something,
Yeah.
or it's rooted in hurt. Like what is hurting you that is making you angry? And lonely, yes, we need human connection. We are not designed to be alone. We are designed to connect with other human beings, which is why COVID, the shutdown created so many mental health issues because we're not meant to be isolated.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to like go into the whole like political of should we or shouldn't have we done that. But the fact
Yeah.
remains, no matter which way you look at it, there was mental health issues skyrocketed during that time. And tired,
Yes.
we need rest. We
Hmm.
have to rest. We have to. I actually just did a post today on my social media about um, a grief hangover because I don't know when you're going to post this interview, but yesterday was Father's Day. That's a big grief day. And
Yeah.
so after those big emotionally charged days, we have a hangover. We're exhausted emotionally and physically, and we're tired. We have to slow down and we have to allow ourselves to rest and refill those reserves.
Mhm.
So I love that halt. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. It's super simple checklist, and if you're down and you go through it, they and ask yourself honestly, they just pop out at you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When that was, I was kind of leading towards you mentioned the tools you give people, and that made me think about that. But like, what other tools?
There's so many. Um, and certain tools work better for some people than others. But one very, very simple, very basic tool that anyone can use anywhere they're at, doesn't matter if they're at work, they're driving, they're at home, is to slow down and intentionally breathe. So do a deep breath in through your nose
Hmm.
and then a slow exhale out of your mouth. And just every time you take a breath, just find wherever the tension is in your body. Where are you feeling tight? Where are you feeling, um, sharp, dull, whatever it is? Everybody holds their anxiety and their loneliness and their sadness and their anger. Everyone holds it differently, but usually it's somewhere between the neck and the diaphragm. So
Hmm.
just find where it is. And every time you take a deep breath in and you exhale slowly through your mouth, try to find wherever that tension is and relax it with every breath. And what that does is that calms down the body. And when we calm down our body, then our mind can calm down. But we can't think our way out of panic. We can't try to calm ourselves down in our mind. We have to calm ourselves down in our body first.
Hmm. That makes sense. It's like the basics for meditation.
Mhm.
In through your
Yes.
nose, out through your mouth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Meditation, we do a lot of meditation in my program. Meditation is very, very, so many studies and so much evidence to show that it expands that window of tolerance, expands that bandwidth that I'm talking about so that you can handle things more effectively.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating stuff. I like it. That's cool. But would what other tools you have? I'm interested
Well,
in
I
this.
can't give everything away on
You
your
got
podcast, Jim.
can't just be a watch this for all of your troubles. I got you.
Yeah,
I
there,
got you.
there, and there are a lot. There are a lot. I
No
mean,
doubt.
we go through like the stories that you tell yourself, dissecting, just because your mind gives you a thought, which we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. Most of those thoughts are negative, biased, and most of them we believe as truth. So just because your mind gives you a thought doesn't mean it's true. And it's a
Yeah.
negativity bias for survival. Like our our brains are wired for our survival. So they are wired to notice the negative over the positive to keep us safe. Like
Yeah.
it's more important that you notice the train coming down, the track in front of you than like the bird singing in the tree.
Mhm.
So our brain automatically goes to the negative. Um, but so we're just berated with tens of thousands of negative thoughts every day, and we mostly believe them to be true. And it's not a bad thing that we have all these thoughts, but just to kind of step back, and if a thought is not serving you, to kind of dissect it and be like, is this thought actually true? Or is
Mhm.
it just a story I'm creating in my mind? Like let's look at the facts and the absolute truths, and let's dissect it from this story that I'm creating.
Mhm. Another, just an observation of mine. I'd be curious to get your take on it. That I think I've spotted in people through my life that they developed they developed a defense earlier in life that they probably absolutely had to do, or maybe more accurately, that they thought they did. So it's what they did. They got through it, and now their brain says, I have to be defensive all the time because that's what got me through. But then they don't spot it. It becomes so much a part of them and their record in their brain that that's how I got through, and I have to do that, and don't
Yes.
recognize when they don't have to do it anymore.
Yes. Yes. That's
Okay?
like they create these neural pathways in their brain. We create
Yes.
neural pathways, and it's like roads. Like, oh, well, this is the road. When this happens, this is the road I take. And
Mm-hmm.
but our brains are very neuroplastic, which means that we can rewire them. We can create new roads so that we don't have those same responses to certain things. And that
Mm-hmm.
also is some of the work that I do with my clients as well, is
Yeah.
creating those new neural pathways.
Yeah. So cool.
Mhm.
Well, we're coming up 50 minutes or so. I don't know how much time you had today, but
I uh I think this is a good place to wrap up.
okay, cool. Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on,
Yeah, I'm
for
gonna
inviting me.
keep following. I just consume that kind of stuff, what you're putting out. So, and have recommended it to a few people to having trouble. I'm like, follow this lady. She's
Thank
got
you.
it. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I
yeah,
do. And I appreciate you following along.
yeah. I love it. All right. Well, enjoy your day.
All right.
Have
Well,
fun,
it
and
was
thank
good
you
to
so
meet
much.
you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Have fun.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.